Denver veterans report for training camp on July 27th at UC Health Training Center in Inglewood as the Broncos look to get back on track following their first losing season in 7 years. We'll discuss the changes they made and how the depth chart shakes out as we preview training camp for the Denver Broncos by going one-on-one with Ryan O'Halloran, Broncos beat writer for the Denver Post, on the OFN Meeting Room with Greg DePalma. It's Friday, July 6th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to the OFN Meeting Room as we preview NFL training camps for the 2018 season. And it continues today, our second today. Earlier, we had some interesting information on the Baltimore Ravens as they get things started with the Hall of Fame game soon. Of course, we also previewed the Chicago Bears earlier in the week. So those are the two teams that are going to kick off training camp early. But the Denver Broncos, maybe a little bit later than everybody else. Maybe they need it. I don't know. We'll find out as we welcome in a beat writer for the Denver Broncos, Denver Post, Ryan O'Halloran, to the program. Ryan, thanks for helping us talk Denver Broncos football today.
Sure thing. Glad to join you.
All right, Ryan. So first things first, how's the fan base been this offseason after a couple disappointing years after the Super Bowl, especially last year? Any better, any more enthusiastic, especially with the new quarterback in town and some new fresh blood?
Kind of, sort of. And we'll start off with a cop-out answer like that. I moved to Denver in mid-May from Jacksonville So I covered a Jaguars turnaround from worst to first last year. And when I got here, is basically the tone of the fan base is they applaud the Case Keenum move because they need some stability at quarterback. But I think Vance Joseph, the head coach, in his second year, has a lot to prove to these fans who, judging by the responses I get, would have been fine with him getting fired after the first season. So yeah. I think there's equal parts enthusiasm and a little bit of trepidation in terms of they want to get excited, but they want to see some reasons for excitement first.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, of course, John Elway is a legend, maybe the legend in the area, so I guess he can do no wrong. But from the time that you've been there, the quarterback position, which is kind of strange because I would have always felt that would have been one position that would have always been secure, maybe drafting young quarterbacks, having Elway around to hey, you know what, I'm not just going to be a GM. I'm going to teach these kids how to play the position too on my off time. But that's actually been an issue with Denver over the years, is developing young quarterbacks. So they go out to get Case Keenum, which was not a surprise. But they have a couple other young quarterbacks on the roster. Paxton Lynch, maybe he was pushed in there a little bit too early. He needed a little time to develop. So I don't know what's the feeling about how he's come along. And also Chad Kelly, who tremendous talent at college. I mean, just loved to watch him play, but he had some red flag issues. He slipped all the way to the final round, final pick and all that stuff. But I'm assuming he's also got a legitimate chance to possibly be the number 2.
Yeah, I mean, Case Keenum is the number 1, and that was the major takeaway from this offseason program was, it impacts the entire organization when you know who your trigger guy is going to be going in week. And you don't have to answer questions about competition. You don't have to worry about maybe picking a guy who's not ready, et cetera. I mean, Paxton Lynch is going to get every chance to win that number 2 job, former first-round pick. I think they want him to play well enough in August so they can say, hey, he's earned the number 2 spot. But, Lynch not working out as a first-round pick started the ball rolling toward Case Keenum. And, that impacted this offense last year. It impacted this offense 2 years ago. So, with Keenum, what they hope is that a veteran guy had a career year with Minnesota last year. He can carry a lot of that confidence over this year.
And the talk was that Bill Musgrave was brought in to replace McCoy last year because maybe the offense was a little bit too complicated. Have you seen or heard of any particular development that's been better since Musgrave's been there with the 2 young quarterbacks?
Well, you hear guys on offense saying it's a simplified scheme and it takes advantage of their talents. Well, they're going to say that all the time about new coordinators. So that's nothing new. But, one thing Bill Musgrave said during some some of his availability is that, they've simplified some things down to one word, and that means protection, the routes, etc. And I think that will have an impact. But on the other hand, you have Case Keenum, who has learned a ton of different offenses. I think he would have been able to handle any kind of verbiage that was thrown his way.
All right, let's move on to the running back position. And no C.J. Anderson. It wasn't a big surprise that they had moved on. Booker, who looked better last year, he looks like he's the number one, but they did go out and draft Royce Freeman. Great career at Oregon. I actually like this Henderson kid. He looks like one of these later round running back picks that the Broncos seem to always get every couple of years that turn into gems. I think he might be somebody to keep an eye on. And then, of course, they got a couple of interesting rookies as well. So it looks like it's a deeper unit this year.
Yeah, deeper in terms of, some potential. But, C.J. Anderson was a 1,000-yard guy, so there's a big role there to fill. I think Royce Freeman's going to emerge and be the week one starter.
Oh, okay.
You don't draft a tailback in the third round and put him on ice. He played a ton of football at Oregon, a ton of work, so he should be ready for, that kind of workload. Devontae Booker will probably take the first snap of 11-on-11 in training camp. See if he can, win it. But I think Freeman may emerge as their guy. Another guy to watch is Philip Lindsay and David Williams. David Williams is a late round pick. Looks like a fullback. Maybe can help him out a little bit there. Looks comfortable as a receiver. And then Philip Lindsay, the undrafted kid, who is a Denver native and played at Colorado. He's I don't want to say a gadget guy, but he can do a lot of different things with his speed and quickness.
All right, over at tight end, you have Huerman and the big, and of course, Fumagalli was taken in the draft. But Jake Butt, this is the big story here. Broncos, I'm sure they felt they got lucky to be able to grab him late last year. He had the injury in the bowl game. So I'm a Michigan fan, so I know how good he is. And as long as there's no issues with the health, this is going to be a bargain. So is Butt the number one guy?
I think so, and there were times during the OTAs where he just was getting open at will, and that's a good sign because, they haven't gotten a lot of production out of the tight end spot since Julius Thomas left. But Fumagalli missed the entire offseason after groin surgery, and so I think it's going to be Butt and Hireman as your top two guys. And that's another wrinkle is how much does Bill Musgrave run two tight end? Did you see Butt as a move guy, Hireman an inline guy? So I think with those two guys, he does have some options.
All right, over at receiver, tell me about the story about what's going on with Thomas and Sanders. A lot of people were wondering, would they survive the offseason as far as Denver's salary cap situation and the contracts with those two veterans? They go out and draft Sutton and Hamilton. So what do you think? Are you going to see these two guys with Denver when the season starts?
I think so. Because you don't want to, as much as they like Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton, they are rookies.
Sure.
And they're not first-round picks, and there's always a transition. So I think Thomas and Sanders, it would be surprising if they moved on from them during camp. But you count on those two. But if I'm a Bronco fan, I would be excited about these two young guys, Hamilton and Sutton. I think they're going to play a role. Isaiah McKenzie had fumbling issues on punt returns last year. The question for him is, going in his second year, does he have to win the punt return job to get a roster spot? I don't necessarily think so, but a guy who could be in trouble is Carlos Henderson, second-year guy, draft pick last year. Vance Joseph called him out during minicamp when he was out of hamstring, saying, you got to get healthy to make this team. So, I'm told that was rare advance, but I applaud it. Sometimes guys need to be called out to wake up a little bit. So I think I think they have a nice mix of veterans and young guys.
All right, and the hope is, though, that they feel confident in the talent of Sutton and Hamilton, that a couple of years from now they're going to be the starting top duo on this team, taking over for Thomas and Sanders?
I think so. This time next year, could be the conversation. Are these guys ready to start? But I think Sutton in particular, having covered Allen Robinson in Jacksonville, reminds me a little bit of A-Rob. effective on the sideline, going up and get a 50-50 ball,
Mm-hmm.
effective in the red zone. So I think Cortland has a chance to make a big impact this year.
Yeah, and that's big for Denver this year is to find those big bodies, especially who can help out in the red zone. Last year, dead last in the NFL in red zone offense. So we could see Sutton becoming a big part of what they do once they get into the red zone this season. As far as the offensive line, Valdir is the big addition. So how comfortable does Denver feel about what they've got coming back?
Well, they say they're comfortable, but they shouldn't, because the projected starting five did not work together one snap during the offseason program.
Wow.
Ron Leary with a knee did not practice at all. Jared Valdir, recovering from that broken foot, did not practice at all. So they're going to have to play some catch-up here once camp starts. And they feel good about Matt Paradis at center. They feel good about Garrett Bowles. He needs to take a step forward at left tackle. But in camp, you got to make sure Valdir's healthy at right tackle. Ron Leary expected to move the left guard, make sure he's healthy, and then right guard's a competition between Connor McGovern, Menelik Watson, and maybe Max Garcia. So I think that's one of the major storylines when the pads go on is who wins that right guard job, and also how do they manage Leary and Valdir's practice time.
All right, and Sam Jones was also drafted. Is he somebody that can make the team?
I think it'd be a little bit of a long shot because they do like Billy Turner,
Okay.
a veteran. They do like, Watson is a guy that can maybe play inside and outside as a swing guy backup. So I think it may be tough for Jones to make this team.
All right, let's turn our attention to defense now. And Joe Woods, everybody, of course, as you mentioned, there was a lot of talk about Vance Joseph last year, and then as I talked about with Musgrave replacing Mike McCoy. But what about Joe Woods? Phillips was a very popular defensive coordinator there. They won the championship with him, and they had a great defense. How does the fan base and the team feel about Woods and what he's done taking over for Phillips?
Well, I think with Joe, he was first-time coordinator last year, and he's going to grow. He admitted that, hey, he understands what the position is better this year in terms of calling plays and in this defense from front to back. He was a secondary coach all the way up until last year. So I think I think Joe's going to be. I think he's going to be fine as your play caller. Just matter can the guys raise their level as well.
All right, and as we take a look at the positions on defense, first of all, starting up front. And now, question, Bradley Chubb, he is going to be playing linebacker, not defensive line, right?
Yeah, he'll play in the base. He'll play strong side linebacker, and then in sub package and third down, he will line up at defensive end, with his hand on the ground. So they have some versatility there.
All right, and I also, before I get to some of the other starters, I want to ask you about DeMarcus Walker because I just was very confused because I loved watching him play at Florida State. Thought he'd be a sleeper in the NFL, and then they threw him at linebacker last year, which I didn't understand that. I mean, his size issues, I get that, and he's fast. Maybe one of those tweeners. But it looks like it looked like to me it didn't work. So I don't know. Are they going back to that, or how are they going to use him?
Yeah, I mean, he's full-time at defensive end right now. He's back up to 280 pounds.
Okay.
So he put all that weight back on. And, you can see he's a rotational guy at this point. That move last year was more a desperation when Shane Ray got hurt. DeMarcus Walker just couldn't get out of the blocks. And, Broncos admitted it. So they moved him back to defensive end.
Good.
And that's where he's trained all offseason.
All right. Now, as far as the starters, this was a good unit last year. And really a surprising unit when they were able to get production. Pecco, who really the last couple of years with the Bengals hadn't been playing that well. He comes over to Denver, has a really good season. Shelby Harris had a really good season. Zach Kerr. So they were very fortunate to get good seasons out of players that maybe nobody expected. And then, of course, you got Derek Wolfe, who's one of the top players along with Gotsis on the line. So they feel pretty comfortable with what they got going on up front.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Pecco at nose tackle, a two-down player. Harris and Kerr there for depth issues. Derek Wolfe, defensive end. Adam Gotsis, defensive end. So, they feel like with Walker, so, they feel like they do have some depth there. And one of those things is can they just play more consistent defense? And that starts up front with stopping the run.
Would the biggest loss up front be depth issues be Pecco? I mean, do you think that they have somebody?
I mean, I guess. I mean, I think if Wolf gets nicked up again, I think that's a tough one.
Sure.
Because then maybe maybe you're forced to play Bradley Chubb more there in the base. So that's tough in a 3-4. So I think between Pecco and Wolf, they need those two guys to stay on the field.
All right, going back to linebacker, what about Shane Ray? He had the wrist injury, and he just hasn't been able to jumpstart his career. 3 wrist injuries in 4 months. So what's going on with that?
Well, not going to be ready for camp, and he's optimistic, but I think the reality is he may not be ready for the start of the regular season. He's had 4 wrist surgeries in the last 11 months. He made it through the first couple weeks OTAs before they decided to operate again. That leaves Bradley Chubb as the starter, opposite of Von Miller. And then inside you got Brandon Marshall and Todd Davis. So it's, Chubb and Miller, those are the headliners. And,
that's
Chubb
pretty good.
is going to have to be ready for that. And then you get into sub-package. Shaq Barrett can be a good situational pass rusher. And, one guy to watch is Jeff Holland, undrafted from Auburn. If you had to pick an undrafted free agent to make this team, he'd probably be at the top of the list. 10 sacks last year for Auburn. He's going to get a chance to make this team.
Yeah, as a Jet fan, I was really upset. First of all, I was hoping, until they traded their 2 second-rounders, I was like, I would pick up the phone and call Denver and find out what you can get for Barrett as the restricted free agent last year. And then I was hoping they'd pick Holland up. Because he wasn't even drafted. And I was like, well, come on, the Jets need pass rushers. They have none. And here's Denver. They get Chubb, they get Ray, they still have Barrett, and then they can pick up Holland. So it's an embarrassment of riches, really, when you think about it, for a 3-4 defense to have all those, those talented edge rushers. How come Barrett? Why didn't any other team? Is there a particular reason why no other team would want to give Denver a second or a third-round draft pick for Barrett?
Well, that is a little surprising, but from the Broncos standpoint, you look at Holland, they basically drafted and signed for insurance after this year. Shane Ray's a free agent after the year. They did not pick up his option. Shaq Barrett's a free agent after the year.
Yeah.
So, they have Holland. They obviously have Chubb. So, for this year, they do have that kind of embarrassment of riches.
Yeah.
And take advantage of it.
Yeah, and of course, as you mentioned, it could change right after the season. Okay, by the way, inside, a couple other rookies to keep an eye on. Josie Jewell, who I interviewed a few months ago, he's got to be somebody that the fans are going to really like. I could see him easily starting at some point this year or next year. And then they drafted the other kid, Bieria. So they've got 2 draft picks from inside, including Jewell. So they're pretty happy with what they've got there with Jewell so far.
Yeah, I think so. And he's special teams probably this year. And if he has a great camp, do they find ways to get him on the field with certain packages? I think that would be one thing to watch.
In the secondary, tell me about how they're going to line up with this secondary. You got Roby and Harris. They're the 2 starting corners. I've been hearing good things about Tremaine Brock, the free agent. And then you have Stewart and Simmons. So, and then also Sua Cravens was brought in, and he's an interesting story because hearing what was going on in Washington with the personal issues and the injuries, how happy are they with what they've seen from him so far? And then they got William Parks. How are they going to run this the secondary?
Well, if they continue their philosophy, they're going to play a lot more dime than nickel.
Okay.
And Sua Cravens has a great chance to be that dime safety.
Got it.
They envision him playing close to the line, and they raved about him during the off season. We'll see what happens when the pads get on, but don't be surprised if it's Harris, Roby, Brock, Simmons, Stewart, Cravens in the sub package for the Broncos.
All right, and what about those other younger players, Parks and also Brendan Langley, who was drafted a little high last year? He apparently still has a ways to go, right?
Yeah, and I think those guys, particularly Langley, they drafted Isaac Yadam from Boston College, and are they fighting for one spot? Do they keep 3 safeties or who's your 4th safety? So in the secondary for this team is you're whittling it down to 53. It's not the top part of the position group. That's interesting. Is the sort of the bottom part is who's gonna play well enough on special teams to be able to, not only make the 53 but be active on Sundays.
If the Broncos get good quarterback play, this really looks like the team, the depth is a lot better than the last couple of years. That this is definitely a playoff team. And there's no any reason and again, you mentioned at the very beginning, optimism and so forth. So I would think there should be some optimism with what they experienced last year and what they've got coming back this year.
Yeah, I think you're going to find out in the first 3 weeks. You're home against Seattle, home against Oakland, at Baltimore, before Kansas City comes here on Monday night. Can they generate some early season momentum? Just to generate belief in your own locker room that this can turn around quickly. And I think the division sets up for a worse to first, because Kansas City with Pat Mahomes, Oakland, totally new defense basically, John Gruden back in the league, Kansas, and then the Chargers started slow, finished fast last year. So I think the division is there for the taking for any of these 4 teams. But with the Broncos is, can you get off to a good start where you're not chasing the season? And they had that big losing streak last year, but create some momentum in the locker room, find the number 1 running back amongst the group, get solid play out of Keenum. I think they do have a chance.
And they have enough talent that if Keenum is healthy and he plays halfway decently, and you can't really blame him if they don't make the postseason, then we might have an issue with the coaching staff, correct? Yeah,
I think anytime a second-year staff, especially with the expectations of this franchise, is, the spotlight's going to be on, Vance Joseph if things don't go well, and it's probably deserved.
And by the way, the special teams, as we close out, really didn't have a good year from what I hear.
Mm-hmm.
They bring in, so the biggest change as far as the kicking game is King. And he's got a very interesting personality as well. So maybe that's an upgrade. That'll help him out. But was that also a part of the draft, and that will be a major part of who they decide makes the final 3 or 4 spots on the roster, special teams?
Yeah, I think so. Tom McMahon came from Indianapolis to run the special teams, veteran assistant coach. And they got to find out who the returners are going to be. Is it Isaiah McKenzie getting another shot at punt return? Do they go with Philip Lindsay? Do they maybe go with Deshaun Hamilton? A rookie on punt return is a big ask. It didn't work out last year with McKenzie. Same with kick return. So I think, the focus on the special teams and preventing those big mistakes is going to be emphasized during camp.
How long were you covering Jacksonville for, Ryan?
I've covered them for the last 6 years.
All right.
So as I told them on my way out, I got you to the playoffs.
And maybe that'll be a good sign for the Broncos. So you've been the first time you've been out west, or have you been out west before?
Yeah. Nope. First time for the Jaguars. Covered the Redskins for 8 years, so first time in this part of the country.
How do you like it?
It's good. Good. Can't complain about the summers.
I've been thinking about. I want to move out west, and I was thinking about the Denver area because it's beautiful country out there. So I'm sure it's a lot different from the east. I'm from the east too. Been in the east my whole life. But It's different, right? Denver, as far as the area. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well,
I've enjoyed it so far.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate it. Hopefully you'll have just as an exciting season covering the Broncos this year as you have with the Jags last year, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to talk to you again when the season begins.
Okay, I appreciate it now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, so that's the Denver Broncos, and gets us an opportunity to find out what's going on there. With the new beat writer for the Broncos, Ryan O'Halloran. And see, it's interesting. We've had, I'd say, 75% of the beat writers we've had on so far actually are fans of the team. But Ryan's an old school beat guy. Because a lot of the new wave of beat guys or guys that just cover internet guys, they're completely different from guys who got into the business, whether it's the newspaper industry and now, of course, have worked their way into the internet, but still newspapers, that's their employer. It's different because those guys, they aren't fans. I mean, trust me. I worked with Dan Leberfeld, who ran Jets Confidential for 25 years, still runs it, and he's not a fan. As far as I know, I never got that out of him, and yet he covered the team for like 30 years or more. So that's the way it is. That's why I usually like to ask these guys about, are they a fan and so forth. I didn't need to ask Ryan about that, though. I know where Ryan comes from. All right. I want to thank Ryan for filling in with what's going on here with the Broncos, and we'll talk to him hopefully later on during the season. We'll see how things go for this Denver team. A bunch of new faces. For me, though, it is all about the coaching staff. I think they have the talent now that they didn't have last year because of the quarterback situation the last 2 years. But if Case Keenum does what he did last year and there's no major drop-off, Denver's a playoff team. But there are those types of teams like Denver, and we mentioned, and look, Kansas City, the Chargers. A lot of times it comes down to winning the close games and staying away from injury. But these are the things that we're going to follow all season long on the Our Lads Football Network. So thanks to Ryan O'Halloran covering Denver Broncos football for the Denver Post. We'll be back again on Monday. San Francisco 49ers talk with Joe Fan, senior reporter for 49ers.com. Don't forget to order Our Lads NFL Draft Review Guide here at ourlads.com. And thanks for listening to the OFN Meeting Room on the Our Lads Football Radio Network, where it's never too early to think about the start of the 2018 football season.